You can go to YouTube same time, right?
Because we didn't test it.
Let me see if I'm up.
Yes, sir.
So let me try the next one.
I wouldn't try it.
No.
We didn't test it.
I got a message saying message is being live.
Look at that.
No, the YouTube. That's it. You're right.
Good evening and welcome to the panel. My name is Ralph Lewis. One more time, it's great to have you with us, and welcome to the panel. The ability of the Cayman Islands to survive the current pandemic and emerge successful depends heavily on the importance of the government, the business community, and the Cayman society. Factual and independent reporting is critical to this success. Today, we discuss the recent passing of the COVID vaccine bills and also the impact of the COVID pandemic has had on the Caymanian workforce. We encourage feedback from the public as we discuss these topics and remind you to like our Facebook page and share the link. And now, without further ado, we head right into our discussion with our panel guests. Mr. J.A. Roy Budd is a former Cayman Island legislator and government minister and former president of the University of the College of the Cayman Islands. He's a highly respected historian and academic and a knowledgeable and engaging public affairs commentator. Good evening, Mr. Budden.
Good evening, Mr. Lewis.
Our second guest panelist is Mr. Mario Banks. He's a former senior government official, director of labor and pensions, and former manager of the Cayman Islands Chamber of Commerce. He has been a political candidate and is a knowledgeable and engaging public affairs commentator. Good night, Mr. Mario.
Good evening, Ralph. Thank you very much for having us again. It's good to be back.
I know, yes. Well, we've had some great feedback from our first panel, and as our viewers may notice, we've changed a bit. We've gone to our homes, and we are now live on Zoom and on Facebook. We'll be turning on YouTube in a while, but just to let you know, we had to use technology to protect ourselves and our lives and our family. And going forward, we'll be live from our homes and at a special time, 8 p.m. every Thursday night. So this is where you gotta be. It's prime time Thursday in the Cayman Islands, the panel right here on Caymanian Times Facebook page and YouTube channels. And we're getting right into the meat of the conversation. Well, this week we had a very interesting start, Monday and Tuesday. I spent most of my time watching the ELA proceedings. It was a great show, but I learned quite a lot. And we had an unexpected outcome. The bills were passed, and I think that the country is getting settled into what's a new development in the Cayman Islands with the passing of the COVID mandatory bills. Mario, could you give us some more information on those bills, please?
Yeah, thank you, Ralph. I want to also welcome the viewers tonight to the panel, and we hope that you'll share the links with your friends and family, and in the comfort of your own homes or your private settings, you'll be able to join us every Thursday evening from 8 until 9:30. And certainly, I'm glad that Caymanian Times and Ralph, you're organizing this, and also I'm very, very honored to be joined by a good friend of mine and someone I respected for many years, mentor and icon, the Dr. J.A. Roy Budden. So good to be here. Now we're very much social distancing tonight because I'm in West Bay. Ralph, you're in Georgetown. I think Dr.
Yes, that's
Roy
correct.
Bodden is in Bodden town, so definitely social distancing. So yes, we did have 3 bills that went to the House, went to the Parliament on Monday and Tuesday and got passed. One was to do with the Coast Guard, and there's 2 other bills, one to do with the Immigration Transition Amendment Bill 2021 and the Customs and Border Control Amendment Bill 2021. Just to give you give our viewers a quick overview of those 2 bills. The Customs and Border Control Amendment Bill 2021 was a bill for an act to amend the Customs and Border Control Act 2021 revision in order to provide in certain circumstances for mandatory vaccination, and as the bill says, for incidental and connected purposes. And basically what that bill did is amended the Customs and Border Control Act and put in a couple of new sections, sections 110A and 110B, which essentially empowered the Customs and Border Control officials in regard to entry of people into the island, that if you had an approved vaccine course, you had to produce a certificate to confirm that in order to be able to gain entry into the country. And if you had a course of vaccine that was not approved, then you have to comply with directions of the medical officer for health with regard to that vaccination. Or it went on to a third category, people who are not vaccinated, unless they're exempted. People who are not vaccinated will have to comply with the directions provided by the chief medical officer or medical officer of health. Now, the bill also went on to say that if individuals fail to comply with the dictates of the Customs and Border Control Amendment bill, when it became law, that their permission to land or to enter or remain or to attend a educational institution in the islands could be revoked. So that's in essence the purpose of the bill, or the objects and reasons of that bill. The other bill that was debated on Monday and Tuesday and passed also and went into the third reading and committee stage on Tuesday was the Immigration Amendment or Immigration Transition Amendment Bill 2021. And that bill was a bill for an act to amend the Immigration Transition Act 2021 in order to provide the circumstances for mandatory vaccination and for incidental and connected purposes. And the construct of that bill mirrored what was done in the Customs and Border Control Amendment Bill, essentially again by adding in 2 new sections, section 52A and 52B, again requiring for those persons who are not exempted and those persons who are eligible to comply with this bill or with this law, again requiring in terms of getting a work permit in the islands, whereas the Customs and Border Control was in regard to entering the island, but in regard to being able to get a work permit, you have to produce a vaccination certificate. Again, for the applicant, the employee or potential employee, and the other relevant dependents. And if the person has a vaccine course that is not an approved vaccine course, they also have to comply with the directions of the medical officer of health. And also, again, mirroring the Customs and Border Control Amendment Bill, the Immigration Transition Amendment Bill also put a provision in that people who are unvaccinated have to give a declaration to the effect that they're within a certain time frames, and the bill set out the time frames that they have to comply with that, so that they will comply with being vaccinated. So in other words, someone hasn't have to arrive on our shores or ready to work on our shores with the vaccine, but if they don't have it, there's a specified time frame that they must comply. So just to make it very simple for all of our viewers to understand. If somebody comes in and they don't have a vaccination because the country that they come from don't have the approved vaccine, Pfizer or one of the other ones, they can wait till they get here, but they have to get the job, the first job as they arrive at the airport, or the first day they're here, and then during quarantine, then the waiting period, and then it's kind of 21 days before the second job, and certainly then before they start to work or whatever, then they have to complete the course, and that is spelled out in the bill again, like I say, in section 52A and 52B. And so that's the essence of what was put forward in those two bills. I guess we can talk about what happened in the House of Parliament on Monday and Tuesday, but that was the essence of two bills.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Mario. And that's one of the reasons why we're here. We get a lot of calls from residents wanting to find out what was said, what was passed, because it's a mouthful, as you just said. And, laws are sometimes written in such a way that you have to be an attorney to understand them. And so by coming on this kind of forum or this platform, we can sort of bring it into layman's terms and speak to everyone and sort of clarify a few points. We're not experts in this area, but just talking about a couple of topics and explaining a little bit, I think it'll help our viewers. And as we go forward, especially in this difficult period, we will hopefully let more people come on 8 o'clock every Thursday night just to hear how we talk about these topics. Mr. Bodden, gonna come to you next. You were a former legislator, so I'm sure you would have quite some experience in the House. And something was mentioned to me the other day. Why didn't the opposition agree with the government? Because it was something so important as a pandemic. And we know that the opposition voted no, and the government voted for it. And that's why it was passed, because the government had the majority of seats. From experiences, can you explain what's the role of opposition?
Well, the role of the opposition is really to be a government in waiting. So you can't expect that the opposition is going to automatically support everything the government brings, because by its very nature, the opposition wants the government to look bad, to look inept, to look like it lacks the ability to govern. So especially on emotive and contentious issues, it is not likely to be supportive of the government. So the opposition's role and how they voted, to me, was expected. I expected them to take that position. But what we also have to remember, in fairness to the government and to give the government credit, the same people that were informing the opposition when they were the government are now informing this government, which tells me that really and truly, apart from the politics of it, there is not that much of a difference in terms of the professional advice that the government is getting. So sum it up in a nutshell, the opposition was playing the role that they're supposed to play, opposing the government, trying to make the government look unprofessional, trying to make them look inept. And the government, for its part, did what it had to do, came forward with a bill that they thought and they purported to be in the interest of the majority, which is the role of the government, to protect the interests of the majority of citizens in the country.
Very good, very good. Just staying with you a minute for a little while longer, Mr. Roy. Putting politics aside, what's your position on having these laws brought and passed, and how will it impact what we do on the citizens in this country, and of course the invited workers who are here and who are wondering what would happen to them? What's your thoughts about this whole scenario?
Quite frankly, Mr. Lewis, I don't think that anyone has anything to fear. It's the responsibility of the government, first of all, to protect its citizens. And guest workers have to understand, guest workers throughout the world, and I'm very familiar with this, guest workers throughout the world have to comply with certain regulations and protocols laid down by the host countries in which they work. And there are countries and jurisdictions and territories with much more draconian jurisdictions, much more draconian regulations than we have now in this time of COVID. And yet guest workers still go to these places and still comply. So what's the big deal? I don't know. I can't for the life of me see what's the big deal. And personally, it may be an agenda within an agenda, but I don't see anything wrong with what the government is requiring. And the government certainly in their presentations seem to me to be rational. They're saying if you're coming here on a work permit, here is what we expect in this time of COVID. And that's it, straightforward.
Okay, thank you very much. And Mario, for those workers who are here already and may have to have their permits renewed in the next couple of months, what should they be worried about, or should they be worried about anything?
One of the questions that was asked by one of the speakers from the opposition side on Monday, I think it was do we know how many non-Caymanians or expats or work permit holders are not vaccinated? It may well be that the majority of them are already vaccinated. So I think that there's a lot of noise about nothing. And I think I'm not sure what the agenda is, as Dr. Roy opined. I'm not sure what the agenda is, because most of the expats that I have spoken to or heard about or heard other people talk about, they're anxious to get vaccinated because in their own countries, they don't have Pfizer or they don't have access to any of the known COVID-19 vaccination. So they want to get vaccinated if they're going to remain here, or if they go home or if they travel. The other thing to bear in mind too, which is very important, is that the United States has recently mandated vaccination for travelers coming into the United States. So if you're going to leave Cayman to go to the United States, even in transit, I think you need to have the vaccination. So I don't know what the problem is, but I do know that, as Dr. Borden mentioned, that the government chose in this debate on Monday and Tuesday to say that they were being reasonable and they were complying with Section 19(2) of the Constitution, Bill of Rights, which talks about administrative correctness in terms of being rational, proportionate, reasonable, and administratively correct. And the other thing to keep in mind is that under Section 9(3) of the Constitution, Bill of Rights, it talks about the fact that that laws can be done under the Constitution, and it is not contrary to the Constitution if it follows certain rules. And one of those is in relation to, it says in Section 9, subsection 3 of the Bill of Rights, in relation to private and family life. It says nothing in any law or done under its authority shall be held to contravene this section to the extent that is reasonably justifiable to society. And it goes on to say under 3A, it says in the interest of defense, public safety, and public health. So if the government is putting in place the amendments to the Customs and Border Control Law and the Immigration Transition Law that is empowered to do so under Section 58 and 59 of those substantive laws, then we are in the right. And as Dr. Roy mentioned, every country has its sovereign right to have what they call gatekeeper legislation. You can manage who comes in and under what conditions. So that's a right that we have. We have a right as well. And I must say, when I drove across that demonstration near the government house on Saturday afternoon and saw some of those signs and banners, I thought I was at a Trump rally. Some of the signs I saw there, and it was scary. Some was even saying that, oh, this is a fake pandemic, or this doesn't exist, and this is all scare tactics. So I don't know whether this thing is just politics or politics, or whether it is people having different agenda. But I don't think that expatriates have anything to fear in the majority. And I think most of them are already vaccinated.
You know, and we're here to give everyone a voice, and I don't have anything against expatriates or guest workers.
Neither.
As a matter of fact, I came here in 1982, and I remember I came here when there was no unemployment. And I was told, you know, Ralph, you're going for 2 years. After 2 years, you better pack up your bags and go back home, because that's what you're coming for. And 3 months before my time was up, I was told by my manager, well, 3 months are coming, it's time for you to start preparing to go home. And it was also said that, you know, the renewal of a permit is not guaranteed. It's taken on its own merit, and things change from time to time. So I understand those. I'm here 40 years later. This is my home. And, you know, I respect the laws of the Cayman Islands. I do believe that the Cayman Islands has grown and has become successful because of the guest workers or expatriates that have come and have formed this society. And we do have a multicultural society, and we all are part of the success. Of course, we have to respect the indigenous Caymanians, people who are here. And I was told you're a guest in another man's country. And so you have to respect that as well. And I'm sure the government's first and foremost role is to look after its citizens. And just remembering about 1/3 of the people living here who vote and who voted them in. So we understand where the priority is, but also we can say that I do believe that we want to be safe when we open up the borders, which is going to be another conversation another time. Mr. Roy, coming back to you, there's another segment of our society that is scared at this point in time. And those are those who have applied for permanent residency, and they're fairly wealthy, and they may have actually applied for their permanent residence, or they plan to. And now these changes may affect them. What would you have to say to those people?
Well, you know, I would say to those people that their fears are unfounded. I don't think that, I don't get the impression that there is any opposition to people applying to reside here. I think what the government is trying to effect sensibly is to try to create some kind of system which is orderly and understandable in the time of COVID. And I think that some people, for their own agenda, whatever that agenda may be, that is why I'm saying from my vantage point, and I share the observation of my colleague Mario. I think that there is an agenda within an agenda. I think that there were some people in the demonstration using that demonstration to get in an agenda that they may have, which is not even tangentially related to the COVID, but it's some other political platform that they think that they may be able to ride some popularity out of. So I would say to those people, go ahead and apply. We have always been reasonable. We have always been fair. And I don't see any sign now that there is going to be any change. I can't speak for the political directorate, but I think the direction they've embarked on is quite logical, and quite frankly, it's admirable, and it is no different from what other jurisdictions are doing at this time.
Thank you. Mario, do you have anything else to add on that topic?
Well, you're right. And I'm glad that you mentioned those other categories of persons that are under immigration control, that the vaccination protocol and these amendments also relate to them. But as Dr. Roy mentioned, there's no agenda here to disenfranchise people or to discriminate against people. We are looking at public safety. This is a war that we are in. We are at a war against an invisible enemy called COVID-19 or SARS-CoV-2 or whatever you want to call him or her. And if we don't all do our part to fight in that war, just as in World War II, you had the resistance, you had people who were cooking food, people who were going at night to the front lines to help out those who were fighting the Nazis, and in those small towns in northern France and Normandy. Everybody did their part in World War II. People were brave, right? if we don't all just take a jab of a proven, safe, and effective vaccine as a weapon in our arsenal to help win this war against this invisible enemy, I think we're being unpatriotic. And I think that if people are able to give scientific reasons to show that this thing is unsafe, that's causing a lot of side effects, where people are dying. Yeah, there are some cases of things happening that are not so good, but those are very small percentage. Then I think we need to, until we find something that is proven, accessible, affordable, and effective, an alternative, let's use what we have. Otherwise, we're going to be dying by the millions and never reopen our economies and never reopen the world, never be able to travel again, you know? So that's my take on all that.
Very well. Well, the governor has endorsed the law, and I guess he'll be signing it in very short order. He actually communicated publicly that he supported it, and he did mention that he listened to those who wrote to him and gave his reasons for, why he supports it. So we expect it to be signed and move into law. And as one of the ministers said, next week we'll be talking about something else. But we're here to talk about many other things as well.
It will be a 9-day wonder. It will be over and done with, and then there will be another topic on the agenda, another topic taking up our attention, and that's perhaps as it should be.
And that's what makes
I chuckle.
That's what makes life.
Because many people.
Go ahead, please.
Exactly. And many people will not understand that that's the role of the opposition. It is not impossible for the opposition to vote with the government on occasions, but normally that is not done because the opposition's role is to be the shadow government. They're the government in waiting. So they're not going to make a government look good, because that means that their chances of becoming the government will be looking good.
Right.
So they're going to find things to object or try to make the government look bad. The key point to focus on is that the same scientists and medical professionals who are advising the opposition when they were the political director are now advising the government. So what is so wrong?
Yes. That's Mario. Go ahead, Mario.
Yeah, thank you. I did enjoy the debates, though. I think there was some pretty good speeches on both sides, and there was some funny aspects as well. But I thought there was some good quality debate, and I think that the opposition tried their best to win some points, but I think that obviously they didn't have the numbers, but I think in this case, in this particular instance, they were not on the right side of history, because it can't be right. So my point that I made at the show last week, Ralph and Dr. Raw, you remember, I was opining that if we say that we cannot allow expatriates to take a vaccine because that's contrary to their human rights, and that's discrimination, can we also say that expatriates can freely compete with Caymanians for employment and for jobs, and that's discrimination too? So if we start down that road of saying you can't discriminate on the vaccine, suppose they say, well, wait a minute, open the floodgates and we want to compete with your people on whatever level or whatever job as well. That can't be right. That can't be allowed.
And that's going to be our next topic. But just to finish off on the early proceedings, I think that the former premier has gotten some rest, because he seemed to have got back his energy. And he was even talking about Alice in Wonderland. It's amazing. I think the now deputy premier said, he really did well in his performances. And it's amazing. And what I understand is that even after the back and forth, they still have good friends. And that's how we should be. We can debate, we can make a decision. It may not be on the same page, but life goes on. And I think that we all want the same thing for the Cayman Islands, because if the government doesn't do well, we don't do well. And so that's the role of them. Anyway, well, we'll watch what happens. Of course, there'll be lots to talk about going forward. There's some concerns about the vaccines and so on, which we can always, discuss in the future. But what I wanted to talk to, and it's one of my very, very important topics, and we couldn't wait to get to this topic. I think Mario was very experienced in that area. And But what my question is, what impact does the pandemic have on the Caymanian workforce? And Mr. Murray, you want to start off with that, please?
I want to start off with it, yes, but I also want to say that yesterday somebody sent me a WhatsApp message with a letter that was sent to the governor by a new group, and it's called the EPACI Expatriate Association of the Cayman Islands, and they were, they have a website where they're seeking members and all of that, and there seemed to be a lobby group or a interest group. I was most shocked by that, disappointed, and I said when I read it, I thought it was fake news. I thought somebody had made something up and was circulating it, because it looked like it was like confrontational to have another group of like an expatriate association of the Cayman Island. So what's it about assimilating into the country? As you said that you did around 40 years ago and others have done. What about integration, assimilation, working together, and learning about the Cayman Islands? I hope we'll be able to talk about this topic maybe in the future as well. But how it all, in my mind, coincides with the issue of the workplace and Caymanians is that if we're going to have two groups, we're going to have these us versus them, building up into this kind of association, it's a very, very bad, it's a dark day for these islands. And I hope I hope somebody, whoever idea was to start that, checks their head and rethink the situation and pull it back, because it's really not wise. Because, we don't want to have this marching and this combative relationship. We don't want to have Caymanians out there marching and placards and stuff and have this combative. We have a very tranquil society, but and as Dr. Roy has spoken about in many of his writings, these books, our society is one of being very accommodating, but don't push Caymanian too far, because you're going to end up in the serious problems. So I hope that that whole association thing doesn't take any root.
Let me come back to you. Let me come back to you, Mario, and because I need to ask you some questions about the employment. But Mr. Roy, we had discussion in the past, and you said you were writing a book about post-pandemic Cayman. And can you give us your views on how it relates to the employment and particularly Caymanian employment?
Yeah, I think that a lot of things are changing, and one of the things that I am conscious of and cognizant of is that there is a deepening consciousness now of our respective roles in the society. And I was just taking serious note of what Mario was saying, because someone else brought the same thing to my attention. Now, I have always held that the Caymanian society is a duality, us and them. And indeed, I said in my book, The Cayman Islands in Transition, that our greatest socialization with outside people is when we meet up at the water fountain in the office. Because at 5 o'clock, at the end of the day, we go our different ways, and we don't come together again until 8 o'clock in the morning. Now, that cannot make for a good society. It cannot make for a good society. And so I say that what we see existing here is artificial. And until we come to grips, as Mario said, and we find some common ground, if the economy would sink, we would find out that we would probably break out into virtual cannibalism, because there is nothing else holding our interests together, nothing of substance gluing us together except the economy. And that does not make for a good, stable society. And the quicker we realize that, and the quicker we begin to work at that, is the better for us, for all of us. because it seems to me that we have a common destiny. It is a common objective for all of us to do well. So no good can come of this. Each person getting their lobby group or their interest group, trying to lobby the governor or trying to lobby the politicians to give them advantage. And so what we need is to go back to the fundamentals. And perhaps we may have missed the point, because we don't have really a formal acculturation process for bringing new citizens into the community. People pay for permanent residence, and they take it as something like you go to the supermarket and you buy a can of Coke and beans. Most people don't feel that they have any commitment to the community or the society. And so they sequester themselves. If it's not, if it's outside of a service club, then they have no contribution or no obligation to the society. We don't go to church together. We don't socialize together. Well, we're not a nation of people going to the stadium to watch football. So we don't, all these kinds of things. And really, we don't know our neighbors. And so that's my concern. You know, as a social commentator and as a public intellectual, that's my concern. And it's interesting that this is going up now, because I'm writing a book called Paradise and the Plantation, an examination of the duality, which is Caymanian society. Because I think our society is a duality. Some people live in paradise and the rest of us live on the plantation. And that does not make for a good, stable, orderly, long-term society.
Thank you very much, Roy. And that's why I named this a serious conversation, because no one wants to talk about these topics. And the time has come that we have to say the things. I'm not against expats. I'm an expat. I came from Montserrat. But, you know, if we have to see what's happening and we have to talk about it, and that's how we're going to fix it, by naming it and dealing with it. And so having a forum like this, I'm happy to, you know, to discuss these issues and come up with some solutions, you know, have discussions with others as well, find out how we can fix this problem, because I know that there are many expats who have made here their home and they love this place. I could speak for my former Montserrat, Dr. Joe Jackman. He was the director of agriculture for some time, and he and his family has done well, and they've stayed here and they love this place. And so there are people who have come here and made it home and have assimilated into society. But we're going to take this topic back to where we wanted to talk about. We know that COVID has cost the Caymans a lot of jobs, and we have a lot of Caymanians who are still without work. There are a number of expats who have had to leave the country because there were no jobs here. So the workforce has taken a hit. And some people may say that once we open the borders, the customers, the business is going to pour back in. But I don't believe that. And there are going to be some serious issues as in the area of unemployment, and not only for the Caymanians, but those expatriate workers who are still here. And government has to deal with that very soon, because you can only have so much in a bucket of water. Once the bucket runs dry, that's it. And what's going to happen after that? So, Mr. Mario, let's talk about the ability to find jobs and who should get the jobs and who wants to get the jobs.
Yes, I was hoping that with COVID, that we were going to take that time, the downtime that we had when the economy is soft and people are now working, businesses are closed down or you know, reduced shift, to really look at where we want to go in the next 20 to 30 years, right? And press that reset button and look at training and development and getting people retooled and upskilled. But that really hasn't happened, is not happening yet anyway. But to your question, it's really the hospitality industry that is feeling the pressure, because the service economy, financial services, and allied services, and construction and development, allied services and industries are really booming. The real issue is in tourism, and that's where I think we need to have a renaissance. We need to have a development plan, a long-term plan, and a strategy that brings together the private sector, public sector, education, intellectuals, and everybody into a proper brainstorming and developing a plan. One of the issues that I see, Ralph, is before the pandemic, the previous government launched the Department of Work, WORC, and they also launched the jobs portal. Now, you and I didn't discuss what I'm going to say next, but it's interesting that they removed the requirement to advertise in newspapers for jobs and put it all to Jobs Cayman portal, right? Now, we all know, anybody who tries to use it or anybody who knows about that, we understand that it doesn't work so well. And people are posting their jobs on the Jobs Cayman portal. And some people are still posting their ads in newspapers, your paper, your Caymanian Times and others, but not as much as before. So a lot of people are not seeing these jobs. And but all they're required to do is post it on the Jobs Cayman portal. That satisfies the requirements of the work permit. So these companies post there, Caymanians are not seeing it. They're unemployed, they're looking for work, but they're not seeing it. And so they post, the jobs are posted, they don't get the applications from Caymanians. They then have an expat apply, or expat is ready in for renewal or have been brought in or want to bring in. And the employer says, well, I gave you everything you wanted, plus I've posted my job, I have no Caymanians. And sometimes the board will say, well, okay, we grant it to you. Sometimes they will say, wait a minute, we know of people who may be available, so you go out there and look again. But again, that hardly happens, and the employer can always say, look, that's not right, I did what I was supposed to do. So my point is this, that the jobs portal was started at a time right before the pandemic. Then the pandemic came in, and it has a lot of problems to be debugged. It's not working well, and I think the work and the jobs portal is not benefiting job seekers, and I think that's part of the reason why Caymanians are becoming more and more frustrated in the hospitality industry about getting an opportunity. Now, we know that things are down. We know people are laying off, and as borders are remain closed, it's becoming, it's more of a challenge. But at the same time, there's still probably 15,000 permits at least, and a large majority of those still are in the hospitality industry. So there are jobs. So why aren't Caymanians getting those jobs? Is it because they don't want them? Caymanians don't want those jobs? Is it because the proverbial thing, Caymanians are lazy, Caymanians are unreliable, or is it the Caymanians are not getting the access to those jobs? And if they get access and get in there, they're marginalized, and in some cases victimized, and not being retained in those jobs. So COVID has made a situation worse, in my opinion, but the problem was there before COVID. And the problem revolves around the lack of a proper human capital development strategy for these islands. That's something I've been advocating for decades. And I know that Dr. Roy, in his capacities of the last 40 years as well, has been fighting for that. But until we get that right, we're going to be putting band-aids on a huge wound. And COVID brings it to the surface, but COVID is not the cause of the labor woes in this country.
Okay, and thank you very much. And yes, it is a long story to be told regarding the work job portal and advertising in newspapers. And as a newspaper owner, I've experienced that personally. But I wouldn't go into that direction tonight. I want to talk about how the pandemic has impacted, Caymanians. And when it happened, I saw a great opportunity to use that downtime. I think, Roy, we had a discussion to train, to retool, to try and encourage our school leavers to look at different industries. When I came here, everybody wanted to work in a bank or in an office, but there's so much other opportunities there. There's healthcare, there's construction, making a lot more money than they would have made in the bank. And the bank jobs are now not there as it was. And so we have to understand that we have to work with our residents, our Caymanians, to try and encourage them to go into different industries, and that's where the future is. We have to look at diversifying the economy, look at other ways of opportunities of working, of providing for our homes. And I think that's where a lot of emphasis should go on, to train and to highlight these things. And I think that's some more efforts needs to be done in those areas. And Mr. Roy, can you give some more comments on those kind of things, please?
Well, I want to make an observation, and it should not be a surprise to anyone. I would caution people not to hold too high an expectation about the hospitality industry being a panacea when things open up, because it's not going to be, for a number of reasons. I think one of the things that the pandemic has shown us is that the hospitality industry worldwide has gone through some adjusting and suffered some pain and is still suffering. Literally, the cruise ship industry worldwide is on the rocks. And I doubt it's going to come off those rocks easily. And even when we open up, stay over tourism is going to come back, but slowly. So for anyone who is saying that the clouds are going to unfold tomorrow if the hospitality industry opens up, I have to caution them that they may be making a grave error, because it's not going to be so suddenly. And then closer to home now, we have never as Caymanians benefited from the hospitality industry in recent times as much as we could have, as much as we can. Now, there are a number of reasons, I suppose, which accounts for that. But I don't buy the one commonplace. Caymanians are lazy, they're unreliable. That is really not our record. For the people that built this country, the merchant seamen, had an established reputation of not only being capable, but of being dependable. So if we were a generation of people who were lazy, they would have not had that kind of reputation. They would have not been able to have laid the kind of foundation for all these other industries who came after them to come. So that one doesn't apply. What we need to straighten out is how much value we are going to put on the Caymanian laborer vis-a-vis the imported laborer. That's what we need to ascertain and decide honestly amongst ourselves. But by the very nature of these industries, it is easier for them to bring people from overseas, pay them less than they would have to pay the Caymanians, and these people would have working on the less amicable conditions than Caymanians, and so they are more attractive to be hired. So it's time that all parties sit down and have a discussion and be fair and open. And until that time comes, we're not going to make it. I don't matter how much pressure the hospitality industry tries to put on the government. Even if the government were to cave in and open up, it's not going to be as ideal as many people think it's going to be, for the reasons I have said and more.
Okay, and I know we're going to have a lot more conversations on employment. It's something that we'll have to face from day to day, and because we heard the pleas of the of our residents and our Caymanians trying to find work. We have another 15 minutes left on the show, but we'd love to talk of one more topic. And the first two topics were very serious. And even though we talk about serious topics, we could find something good to talk about. And what I want to talk about, final gentlemen, is how we have dealt with our healthcare in this pandemic. We are hearing multiple cases of new positive cases, particularly recently in our schools, and how it's affecting the children. But we must say there has only been 2 deaths, and they're not related to Cayman community spread. And one child was admitted at the hospital, and he's doing well. But if you look in there, there's relatively everyone who is either asymptomatic or symptomatic at home doing well. So we have an excellent healthcare system, and we have to take our hats off to those who work in in the healthcare industry. So I think we have done well in that area, and I trust that we'll be able to continue to do well, because even though we're seeing increases in cases, we're not seeing any major illnesses or anyone dying at this stage. And we just hope that it continues. So there's something to be happy about, that we're not seeing the level of deaths that we're seeing in other territories around the region. And as we prepare to open our borders, which I think will happen very soon, I think we are prepared. And once we build up our resistance, eat healthy, look after our bodies, I think we'll be able to survive this pandemic. We don't know what will happen. We don't know anything what the future will hold, but from what I've seen over the last year and a half, we have done well. Mario, any thoughts on that?
I just want to go back to that not so happy subject that we just did. Just add to me that Dr. Roy mentioned. Go right ahead. Dr. Roy mentioned about the hospitality industry. We need to create more ownership by Caymanians in that industry. Yes. And that means they got to get in there, and they got to be able to stay in there, and they have to be champions, because if they get the opportunity, and if they're it's like owning a house. If you own your own home in a country, you feel you have a stake. The same thing, if you have something in an industry, you will defend that industry. Now Caymanians are saying that they're paying the price but not really getting the benefit. So I want to agree with Dr. Roy Bodden on that, as well, as to say that Caymanian role models in the hospitality industries. Where are the Caymanian hotel managers? Where are those that are leaders of restaurants and condos and whatnot? They're few and far between. So I think we need to get back to looking at where we want to go. And the Education Council is critical in this, and training people, but not just training them, but making sure that when they finish their training, that they're given proper jobs and they'll be able to assimilate. But going back to our health, one of the things that people have been saying is that, oh, we don't need to get the vaccine. We can, build up our immune system by taking, vitamins, minerals, zinc, and garlic, and vitamin D and all that. Oh yeah, that's all good stuff. And making sure we eat right, and we keep strong. That's critical. But having something else to tackle this invisible enemy of COVID-19, we need to have something else. That's why the vaccine is important. I'm not going to be a vaccine crusader, but I think vaccine is a very important part of our battle. I want to also join you, Ralph, and Caymanian Times in heralding our frontline workers in the hospitality sector. Those people who've been out there for the last 18 months, testing and contact tracing and educating and whatnot. I think the Cayman Islands is a success story. We have right now probably 74% vaccination of our population, which is one of the highest in the world. The third jab, or the booster, is also being administered. Again, a very good thing. What is not helpful is that we don't have enough discussion about the technical aspects of the vaccines. I know that one of the other talk shows has been doing some series with medical experts looking at the vaccine and doing some discussion around that. I know you've done some as well in your paper, but I think that we are in a good spot. We can't panic. We have to plan. And as I said at the inaugural show last week on the panel, is that we need to have all of our stakeholders come together, the private sector, the public sector, put together a proper plan, structure, strategies, and let's open our economy safely, but have a proper plan. So if something goes wrong, we quickly know what to do and who's going to do it, and not be panicking. We're in a good spot. Let's just keep growing from strength to strength. That's my view on it.
And you mentioned a good word, panicky. I think that's the success of how we will get through this pandemic. We have to stay calm, collective, and someone has to be in control. And yes, the tough days may be ahead, because of course, once we open the borders, we'll get increased cases. We may have a few of our people going to hospital. Hopefully no one dies, but the nurses and healthcare workers are going to have a huge task ahead of them. So yes, they've done well so far. We congratulate them, but please, we understand that the task is going to be huge going forward. And we trust that they take care of themselves as well. And we'll be there to support them as they go along. Mr. Roy.
Yes, Mr. Lewis, at your service, sir.
Yes, sir. Can you chime in on the healthcare and how well we have done, and what else can be done regarding educating our residents on the vaccines and the care, health care, and so on?
I too, Joe, I think that the success that we have experienced and are experiencing, credit goes to a lot of the entities. I think that one of the things that I found encouraging and gratifying with the last political directorate, I like the role that Premier McLaughlin played in leading us, in walking us through the pandemic during their time as political directorate. I think that was commendable. I think it was easily understandable, and I think it certainly was confidence boosting to me as a citizen, as a voter. And then there was the professional part of it, the role that the medical scientists played and the doctors and all that. But let us not forget that the public was to a large extent also cooperative. And many times we neglect that, because if we didn't have a cooperative public, if we didn't have a populace who were prepared to abide by the protocols, all the leadership of the premier and all the advice of the medical scientists would have gone down the drain. So let us give ourselves as a citizenry who are cooperative, who are understanding, who are willing to take some inconveniences. Let us give ourselves some credit. Notwithstanding the fact that we were complaining about the lockdowns and the mental strain and stress, we did well. And we will continue to do well if we hold those attitudes. But now I'm concerned because all of that success has led some people to have an aversion to continuing cooperation now. And they're beginning to express resentment and concerns about having to mask up again, about the possibility of having to social distance again. We cannot let up. We have to remain disciplined. Discipline is going to take us to a lot of places. So we have done well. I think that the Cayman Islands stands, we can compare to any jurisdiction in the world where success in combating this pandemic is concerned. But we cannot afford now to go awry, to let go all of those things which have brought us to this point of success by beginning to be obstinate and to express reservations against what the authorities are trying to lay down in our best interest.
Thank you. If I may just mention a couple of things. I'm from the Caribbean island, and we always prepare for hurricanes. And one of the mottos as Coast Motto is be prepared. It's so important. It's easy to be prepared and you weather the storm. And the hardest part is recovery. When you step out of that door and see that all of your trees have gone and you survived, but there's no roof. Your house is damaged. Your workplace no longer exists. You have to rebuild from scratch. And I remember coming out of my home and looking around, and you couldn't even get to town, and Hurricane Ivan really destroyed Cayman. And the hardest part was rebuilding. But we did it, and look where we are today. Locking down for COVID is something similar. We prepared, we took the advice of the Premier and his government, and we stayed in. It was hard locking up on a Sunday, not going to the beach, but we did it. And we were able to gradually come out of the doors I just can't go overseas because I can't deal with the quarantine for 5 days or 7 days. So I understand how hard it will lock down. But the hardest part is coming out of that. And so therefore, we may not have seen any deaths during that time, but I guarantee you there's a lot of mental illnesses, a lot of hurt and pain, a lot of shortages in finances, damage to relationships. There's gonna be a huge task to get back on track. And that's what we want to prepare people for that. You know, we can do it, but it's not gonna be an easy ride. It's gonna be hard, and the hardest is yet to come.
And that is why, in a way, we have to be a community which is knit together, because we have to help one another. This is a crisis, and we have to be able to support, to encourage, and to help one another. That's why it's critical. I say this, and I know that both you, Ralph, and Mario know this, and that's one of the things that bothers me about Caymanian society. It's one of the weaknesses. We are not knit together. When a crisis comes, when the crunch time comes, we too easily see the differences rather than the similarities, and we see that, oh, this person is different. We are. I was made privy to a comment earlier this evening. I don't know if it came from the association, Mario, that you said you were surprised to say that there are accusations now by some people, some white folks, saying that Caymanians are racist.
I saw that on some of the Facebook posts as well. Yeah.
There we go. There we go. There we go. I mean, that's a new narrative now, which is being embarked upon, and we have to be careful how we look for bogeymen, because we will find it where they don't exist, and that will bode no society. That won't speak good for any society, because I don't think that is. I don't think that's factual. Just like I know that Caymanians are not lazy, I know Caymanians are not racist.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Roy. Mario, please.
I think you're right, Dr. Roy. Like I said, we're trading on some dangerous area here with what is happening with this new association. I hope that whoever's behind that will really rethink that and withdraw it, because it is a dangerous thing. I do believe, I support what you're saying about communication. Ralph, the government needs to do a better job of communicating proactively and with confidence, and coming out there and not it's not a case of being upstaged or afraid to say something. Once you're ready to say it, let's just get out there and say it, get people behind us, and let's work together, because we're all in this together. I know that there's some anxiety now about people who are having to isolate because their child might be in a class with another child or in the same school or whatever, and the whole family is out isolating. I think the government is looking at trying to rationalize that time frame for isolation as well, to make it equitable with, because on the one hand, as somebody mentioned in the parliament the other day, you can't say to people, travelers coming in, you can, if you're vaccinated, you can quarantine for whether it's 7 days or 10 days, but you tell the Caymanians you got to do it for 14, and they're vaccinated and they got to isolate for 14. So you got to get it all consistent. But I think that, there's two things: the lockdown strategy and the reopening strategy. As I said in the show last week with the two gentlemen, we need to know who is in charge of this thing, what's the plan, what's the structure, when it's going to happen, do we have contingencies, and is there a proper project plan or not? Maybe there is, but for God's sake, tell us and communicate and embrace people, and let's work together.
And next week, gentlemen, if you join me again, and I'm sure you will, we'll be discussing the reopening strategy. So we invite all of viewers to join us next week at 8 o'clock, same place, same time. We apologize for our YouTube fans. Unfortunately, it wasn't connected up tonight, but we'll have it in place next week, Thursday at 9 p.m. Mr. Roy, anything, final words tonight from you, sir?
I would just, like to encourage our viewers to be optimistic. We have been through crises before, and we came out well. Once we are united in our efforts and we exert some effort at being empathetic and understanding, we will be able to surmount the greatest crisis. And here's an apt quotation again that I'd like to leave, and it comes from one of my favorite historical personalities, Frederick Delano Roosevelt. He is one of the people I admire in history, the only man who could have taken the United States out of the Depression into success in the Second World War, although he didn't live to see the end of the war. President Truman finished that, but he said, there is nothing to fear but fear itself. So we shouldn't let fear defeat us. We should go forward boldly, whether it's the reopening or whether it's a lockdown. Once we have the strategy, and we should also let the government know that we are supportive of them in their efforts to provide the best for us in these times. And I think if we have a formula like that and we believe in God, then nothing is impossible. Nothing is impossible.
Thank you, my friend. Mario, any final words?
My final word is that this is a war. COVID-19 is a war. We need bravery and unity, not objectors and pontificators. I also want to end with a president quote as well. And I know that Dr. Roy talked about Franklin Delano Roosevelt. I want to end with Ronald Wilson Reagan, who talked about that bright shining city on a hill. You're a bright shining city on a hill. Let's work towards getting things better. We can do it, Cayman Islands, and we will. Good night. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And folks, we live in paradise. Paradise needs some work right now, but we can all do together, no matter where you're from. Once you're here, and just let's work together to make this place paradise that we knew it. Thank you for watching, and see you next week. God bless from the team, Mr. Roy, Mr. Mario, and myself, Ralph Lewis. Thanks for watching, and remember to pick up your copy of Caymanian Times tomorrow. You'll be very pleased to see what's inside. Thank you and good night.
Good night. Thank you, Ralph.
Thank you and good night.
Night.